being here at the Voice of College Football. 7 games today. A lot of players opting out. A lot of matchups that aren't necessarily the most sterling. Some are, some aren't. Some lived up to a bit of hype when we had a ranked matchup this afternoon, of course, in Florida. And we will run through it here at the Voice of College Football. Appreciate you stopping by. And again, these are the kind of matchups and these are the kind of days that for the majority of my life I have lived for. Love bowl season. However, as I admitted the other night to Corey Bratta on our Hawkeyes show, check it out, Iowa channel. You should be there every Tuesday if you like the Hawkeyes, of course. Even if not, good college football discussion there on the Iowa channel every Tuesday with Corey Bratta, myself. We get together, good football talk. All right. Because I got to say that it's funny because Corey is so wrapped up with the Hawkeyes that he doesn't get a chance to see as much college football during the regular season as he would like. And then bowl season kicks in and Corey takes pride in watching all the bowl games. I don't know that he gets to all of them, but he comes extremely close, as I have my entire life. And now in this day and age of digital media, you can go back and watch whatever you want. I have watched basically close to everything unless I can't watch a particular game and it's 52-14. Maybe I won't watch that. And certainly on a day like today, give me North Carolina, UConn. Hey, I'll watch it. Nebraska-Boston College. To me, throughout my life, that has been a must-see. ACC, Big Ten. Gotta watch 2 Power 5 teams getting together. And, of course, Iowa State, Miami, and tonight, Colorado and BYU. When I look at that slate, I think, man, I'm all in on this. All in on this. But I would have to say, how many of these bowl games have I watched this particular year? Well, what's happened in my life for the last several years has been the last 3 bowl seasons have been separated from kids and therefore traveling to spend my holidays with my kids, and boom, they're front and center. We do whatever we want. I'm vacationing. If you've noticed here at the Voice of College Football, you haven't really seen me live since last Monday. Did a live show with the Big Ten show on Monday night, and I've been absent ever since, excluding one Iowa show we did. And then I got back at it this afternoon. And I got to say, this afternoon, I'm looking at, if this was me 5 to 10 years ago, I would just be hating to travel on a Saturday with all these bowl games being played. Today, yeah, I'm thinking I'm going to go back. I'm going to watch Nebraska-Boston College for sure. So I was traveling all day. And by the way, whether you want to hear this story or not, some of you folks enjoy these little side stories. Others do not, because you want to get to the college football. We do have a caller on the line, but I may be a bit long-winded here for a few minutes. That, it's the second leg of my flight today. And let's be honest, we've got, I'm on a puddle jumper that's only 2 seats. And I don't know that really matters because the seat size are the same pretty much on all these flights, unless you have an airline that you prefer that maybe has larger seats or something like this. They're the standard, coach class seats. And I'm all the way in the back of the plane. And I have a rather large gentleman. I will be kind. I'm always kind. Rather large gentleman. He should drop 100 to 150. He should drop an easy $1 to 150. Okay, fine. I know that I'm in for a spacing issue. I know that he's going to impede on my space. And we know what the spatial issues are on an airplane. That basically, you've got your armrests, you've got your just space to deal with. I know that he's going to impede on this as soon as I see that this gentleman's approaching my row and we're the only 2 sitting in that particular row. Number 2, he gets within 3 or 4 feet of me and whoo! Yeah, the guy was not pleasant to be around. He reeked to this degree. And I'm not picky about these sorts of things, but the dude just reeked from 3 or 4 feet away. Okay. To the point where when he sat down, immediately within 30 seconds, the stewardess, I guess we're not supposed to call them that, the stewardess, the flight attendant came up to me. tapped me on the shoulder. I'm sitting on the aisle seat, taps me on the shoulder, whispers, "I'll try to find you another seat." "Thank you. I appreciate it," was my response. And she was not able, though. She came back a few minutes later. She said, "I thought I could find you another seat, but we are jam-packed." And so what made this little issue even worse is I'm just not feeling the best. I'm feeling fine. I'm not sick, but I'm not feeling great to begin with. And I'm kind of worn down, not been sleeping, slept a couple hours, that sort of thing. One of those deals. Went to bed at 2 a.m., had to get up at 4:45 for a flight. My body's used to that. It's not a big deal. But still, not feeling the best. Have this situation going on. And then on top of that, we understand that, well, the airlines was a bit inconsistent on this. First of all, we were taxiing forever, and then they let us know that we would have to taxi some more and that we would then have to sit on the plane and wait. First reason given was because that there was weather in the area. Okay. So I texted my buddy that's living close to me, and he said there's no weather here, no weather situations that I'm aware of. And then the second, after it was explained about 15, 20 minutes later, it was had to do with the traffic, the air traffic in the area. That, of course, they can only have so many planes in flight at the same time in the same area. And so then that was given. So that delayed us 2 hours, not 2 hours where we could deplane, 2 hours sitting on the plane. So my 1 hour flight, 1:15, something like that scheduled, turned into a near 3 hour flight with this gentleman next to me. So that's my story of the day. I got home about, about 3 p.m. this afternoon. And we did a record with Jed May of Rivals to talk Georgia. We'll release that tomorrow. That'll be on the Georgia channel, I believe. Then we will also, we did our Buckeyes show with Steve Hellwagon, Tony Gerdeman, and our special guest, Ryan Winter. Check that out. That's on the Buckeyes channel. Of course, we talked the Rose Bowl up. That's a must-see Rose Bowl preview with Steve, Tony, and Ryan. And over the next few days, I've got some tremendous guests lined up. Got Chris Drew from Menace to Sports. I've got Spencer McLaughlin from Locked On, and Steve Hellwick to talk Boise State, Marty Lee, Penn State. We are going to be all over these matchups coming up. Yes, I have been a bit absent since bowl season over the last 5 days or so. So forgive me, but the voice of college football is back, and we are ready to roll. I will say today that I didn't take in much. I got back 2 hours later than I was supposed to, and did some recordings and so forth. Another one was Steve Merrill, Patreon members, YouTube Premium members. You get your Steve Merrill selections. We went through all the college football playoff games. So, and my picks are out there. They are nothing to write home about. These bowl games are almost impossible to predict for a number of reasons we will discuss here in just a second. And so, yeah. By the time I got all that done, and then I hadn't eaten for almost a day, so I went and got myself some Chick-fil-A, and then it's pushing like 7 p.m. tonight, and I felt like crap, so I actually snoozed for I was hoping about 2 hours. I probably got an hour in, so I am rested and ready to go and revived, but not really an understanding of what happened today in college football, other than I seen all the scores, and I did in fact, watch most of the Miami-Iowa State game. Had that recorded, went through the game, watched all the game. And then these games last night intrigued me as well, in particular, Texas A&M and USC. And I know we live in a world that's gone. That's dated. Shoot, the game 3 hours ago is gone. It's over. Nobody cares. And nobody cares about these bowl games to begin with. I had this conversation with my son and my daughter-in-law. Last night we were out to eat, and there was a bowl game on, Texas Tech and Arkansas. And my son's asking questions about it because my son is sports knowledgeable. He knows the structure. He knows everything that's going on in regards to how sports is played, how college football works, who's in the conferences, but he doesn't care. He doesn't watch. So he was asking me questions about Texas Tech and Arkansas and how good they were and what bowl this was and so forth and so on. And we're going through it. And the point of my story was going to be, I just let him know. I said, oh, so he said, are you going to do a recap on this game? I said, well, we're hanging out tonight. I'm not going to do it tonight. And then by the time I get home, I said, nobody cares about this game. I could do a recap on this Arkansas-Texas Tech game tonight, and nobody's going to watch it. Nobody really cares that much about it. I would love to do that. All the Power 5 bowl matchups, I would love to do previews and recaps on them, but nobody cares about them. And I said, but it's this, and he said something about after we talked about our plans that particular night, we played pickleball and had a good time. He said something about the next day. And I said, shoot, the next day. I said, everybody's going to be like, well, that was forever ago. Nobody cares about Texas Tech and Arkansas 30 minutes later, let alone 30 hours later. And so that's the state that we live in. I said, so basically I said, I do these call-in shows, and he couldn't believe it. He thought that we talked about bowl games all the time. I said, nobody wants to talk about bowl games. I said, there has to be something spectacular happen in a bowl game to just get some mention in the chat. And then maybe I'll get asked about, did you see that play in the last 13 seconds of that bowl game? Or it was 52-51. That was kind of crazy. That's about it. And I said, everybody just wants to talk about the playoff. I said, I'd like to talk about the bowl games. Although, again, like I told Corey Brada the other day, I used to be a glutton for bowl games, remembered all the bowl games, all the stats, all the scores, and everything else. But anymore, I'd have to go through and tell you how many bowl games I watched. I did watch Oklahoma and Navy over the weekend. I didn't sit and watch the game for 3.5 hours. I went back late at night and went through the game and watched the entire game. Oklahoma's winning by 2 touchdowns, and somehow Navy comes back and wins that game, and Oklahoma scores what should have been the tie score to make it 21-all and go into overtime. And of course, hey, Brent Venables already decided we're going for 2, and that just looks bad. I don't know what it really means. I had somebody on Facebook comment to me, can you believe Navy beat Oklahoma? Well, sure I can. Oklahoma was a 2.5-point favorite. They had 25 players in the transfer portal. So what do we do with these games? What do we do? Can we just go one by one and say, well, and we've got to go through all the metrics of who opted out and who didn't and who cared and who didn't, and did that really matter? Oh, it maybe is about a 50% scale of validity. Was this valid, this score? UConn and North Carolina get together. There's no comparison who has the better roster, but I did not look into that game. I don't know who opted out for North Carolina. Obviously, their coaching situation was in disarray. I don't even know who coached the game, probably their offensive or defensive coordinator. So are these games valid? I think it's a shame if they're invalid, but I largely believe that they are invalid. To a certain extent. And I hate to have to try to go through each one and say, well, this one was valid. This one was not valid. This one kind of was valid because bowl games used to matter and bowl records for coaches used to matter. That used to be about the second or third item that people would go to and say, oh, wow, Urban Meyer's 12-3 in bowl games. Wow, he's amazing. He's a Hall of Fame coach. He knows how to prepare teams for bowl games. And it meant something, and it truly meant something, and does to this day, that Nick Saban, Urban Meyer, Bobby Bowden, Joe Paterno have outstanding bowl records. But going forward, is that going to matter? Well, then we're going to have to dissect. What bowl game was that? Well, it was a college football playoff game. Okay, that one matters. And other than that, it's up to debate. I went through real quick. This was my prep for the show, basically, besides watching Miami and Iowa State. And yeah, I am a glutton for punishment at times, but I do 20-15 Nebraska beat Boston College. I do want to go back and watch that game. I do. If there's any other game today that I will watch, I do want to go back and watch that game. And I want to watch this Texas A&M USC game. And that brings me to another point that I'm going to go on a soapbox about here in just a second. And forgive me, Chris and the real MVP. But I've got to state this. Two other things here before we run through the scores rather briefly. And we hope you had a great Christmas and are planning on a great New Year's Eve. I got to say, I'm debating whether to do something on New Year's Eve or to be here watching Penn State and Boise State and spending my New Year's Eve with all of you. I have some invitations and some offers that have been made in regards to spending a real New Year's Eve, but I haven't done that the last few years because we've had college football playoff games for quite some time, actually. The last 10 years. But one point I wanted to make was I went through the group of 5 versus Power 5 matchups. The group of 5 is 6-2 against the Power 5. Now, typically in the past, this has been 6-6 Power 5 team, insert team, Rutgers, Wake Forest, South Carolina versus group of 5, one of the best in the group of 5. Navy, Tulane, again, insert your favorite group of 5 team that is one of the best in the group of 5. That's what the situation has been. And so it's been understandable that we've had group of 5 teams win in the past over the Power 5, although I do believe that the Power 5 has a significant lead in bowl games, even though much lesser Power 5 teams are playing the best group of 5 teams. But if you look at these matchups this particular season, these group of 5 teams are not stellar group of 5 teams beating these Power 5 teams, i.e. Toledo over Pitt. Toledo did not have a great season. They lost to Akron and others down the line. Just minutes ago, of course, a win by East Carolina against NC State. 26-21 in that one. And that East Carolina team, not very good. I believe 7-5 against an NC State team, 7-5 in the ACC. And the ACC boy is having a stellar bowl season. Stellar bowl season. And I actually think that it's pretty valid, the number of losses for the ACC. I think that that is reflective on how bad the ACC truly is. Last comment I'm going to go to before we take calls is this. USC wins over Texas A&M last night. Again, I did not see the game. I kind of ran through the recap to see what happened and that they scored. I saw the game-winning touchdown, and I do, yes, want to go back. Am I going to stay up till 4 o'clock in the morning this morning? Maybe I will, and watch Texas A&M and USC because I'd like to see that game and 2 or 3 of the games today. Of course, we got Colorado on the field losing tonight, and that's kind of a big deal because of who played in that game, who decided to play, i.e. Travis Hunter and Shadur Sanders. But I don't know how they perform, but apparently not well, 36-13. But I come to this conclusion because somebody who will remain nameless, but you know very well, texted me a couple times after the USC-Texas A&M game to basically point out USC's not that good. They're 7-6. Are USC fans going to brag about this? They beat an SEC team in a bowl game, so forth and so on. And I said, I get that. I'm not here to defend USC football at 7-6 this year, and I'm not here to say that USC is some great football team. However, look at USC's resume and look at Indiana's resume. Is there really much difference between the two? Indiana goes 11-1. They go to the college football playoff. They played a Notre Dame team that USC just played a few weeks ago. Who played a better game against Notre Dame? That's not even debatable. Indiana could barely gain a first down against Notre Dame. Their defense played pretty well, controlled Notre Dame. Now, USC being a much different football team than Indiana, a much more talented team than Indiana. I'm not saying better than Indiana, not making that claim, but they played a better game against Notre Dame. That game was a one-score game. USC Notre Dame, ball at the 20, 25-yard line in the red zone, 2 or 3 minutes left, down a touchdown. USC was 20, 25 yards away from tying that game with 2 or 3 minutes left. And no, I am not blowing out of proportion the results of one game comparison, but it is 1 point of data. And also, USC beat a good LSU team. Now, is that a vintage LSU team? Is that a quote-unquote good LSU team? No, it's not a good LSU team. It's like a below-average LSU team. But a below-average LSU team is better than just about everybody outside of 15 to 20 teams in the country. USC beat them. They beat Texas A&M last night. I don't know how many. I just looked at the box score, so I don't know how many opt-outs for Texas A&M. I see that Amari Daniels, their best running back, did not play, but they had their other 1A running back. They had their starting quarterback, Marcel Reed. So there might have been some opt-outs there, but Texas A&M, not a great team. Again, not selling them as a great team. They finished 8-5, but I'm talking about a mid-tier SEC team that was capable of winning games against the likes of who? LSU, pretty close to South Carolina until late, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. We know what Texas A&M did this year. But USC puts together a resume where they beat LSU, they beat Texas A&M. They took Michigan to the final play of the game. And is Michigan great? Again, I am not trumpeting Michigan as a good football team. A bad Michigan team, but still a team that is as good as anyone outside the top 25 in America. And it went down to the last play of the game at the Big House. I don't know that the Indiana performance against Michigan, considering they played at home and they could do nothing offensively after the first quarter, is fairly comparable. And that when you look at, this is what's wrong with college. This is one of many things wrong with college football, but I go to scheduling in terms of on the field issues, not talking NIL transfer portal, but in terms of the way the game's played on the field, the scheduling situation is ridiculous. We just had Indiana go to the college football playoff. And I know Indiana fans are probably starting to hate me for this, but the more I look at this, think about this, review this, no, they can't control who they played in the Big Ten. And so the Big Ten did a poor job, just like the SEC has for 30 years, in scheduling. It's a bad schedule. And I know you cannot completely predict how good teams are going to be. They're going to elevate. They're going to decline. You can't predict this. But if you have a good scheduling format, you somewhat can forecast legitimately and give teams an equitable schedule in your conference. Plus, of course, the conferences are too big. Therefore, you have more variation between these schedules, and therefore you get an Indiana situation. But on top of that, I don't believe anybody would have complained, certainly not myself, had Indiana gone out and scheduled somebody. They did not schedule anyone. Zero. They played 3 high school football teams. A complete garbage, pathetic schedule. And I have people defending them by saying, well, they're Indiana. They didn't know that they'd be in this position. So that's who they exactly. That's the point. They're Indiana. So they didn't expect to be competing for a college football playoff. Then you're really not a college football playoff participant. And again, I'm not saying that I would have left them out. I would not have left them out. I just think it just emphasizes how broken the system is. And USC's out scheduling LSU and Notre Dame as non-conference games. And then we're looking at USC and their record at 7-6 and talking about how bad they are. Do we really think that USC is any different than Indiana? Do we think that Iowa is any different? Do we not think that Iowa and USC would have competed better at Notre Dame than Indiana would have? I can't guarantee that. It's a hypothetical, but I will say that my money would be on USC and Iowa competing better in South Bend last Friday night against Notre Dame. All right. We appreciate you being here at the Voice of College Football. Consider buying the book that we have put together. If you love college football, this thing should be flying off the shelves of Amazon. Disputed National Champions, check out the link. It's in the description section of the video. You will love the book. Everybody has. I appreciate all the great feedback that we've gotten, and I've done a poor job of marketing, so we will get on that soon, and we will be posting all those many fine reviews and comments that people have made, so I appreciate that. A lot of people on Facebook have taken a picture of the book and shown people that it was delivered for Christmas and that they love it. And so I thank all of you folks for helping us market the book. All right, let's get to it right here at the Voice of College Football. We got the real MVP on the line.
Hey, Mark, I hope you cut that rant out and make it a YouTube video. It was a good rant, Mark. I was cheering along with everything you said. You are not what your record says you are. This is not the NFL. USC and Michigan could potentially win the Big 12. Cry about it if you want to. Maybe even the ACC with what they've played like so far, Mark. ACC 1-9. Are they the worst conference in America?
And that's where we got to go with these bowl results, though. You have to kind of dissect each one. But I got to think, I haven't looked at it, that once the quarterback, Stylianos, opted out, but that was earlier this season. His backup has played decently. I know that he played today against Nebraska. Don't think that there was an egregious number of opt-outs for these teams. They lost that game. I think it's a pretty fair assessment of the two teams, and they played a 6-6 team from the Big Ten, team that went 3-6 in the Big Ten, and they lost. So that's another loss. And then these group of 5 losses. If you've noticed this, down through the years, there has been no conference that has lost to more group of 5 teams, both in regular season play and in bowl play, than the ACC. This is not uncommon for East Carolina, the likes of an East Carolina, to defeat NC State.
No, but it's not a good look for them at all, especially when their one win was against a Washington State team that basically lost every single good player. They lost, 30 players? Embarrassing. Completely embarrassing. Mark, I want to talk forward, go visionary, though. I'm not sure if you're watching the Independence Bowl because bowl games are completely meaningless now, but Marshall opted out because their head coach went to Southern Miss and all their players are like, we're hitting the portal.
Yes.
And basically went to Southern Miss. Do you think that's likely to happen in the future? We're going to have teams, let's say, like an Ohio State, a Michigan, a USC, a Ole Miss, or Alabama that says, hey, we didn't make the playoffs. Season's over. We're gearing up for next year. We're opting out.
Yeah, so there's money to be made, but we have seen teams opt out. A couple come to mind in the past. Notre Dame did opt out of a bowl game about 30 years ago when Lou Holtz called it quits. And Ohio State, when Earl Bruce got fired, they opted out of a bowl game. And this is when people actually cared about bowl games. Yeah, you got to think that this is going to be a common practice. Although I do think that the one saving grace in all of this possibly could be when these players are officially and formally paid based on the media rights distribution starting next season, that if the powers that be, and when I say the powers that be, I don't even know who's in charge necessarily, because the NCAA is kind of in charge, but of course their power is weakening. The conferences are in charge of their own conferences. I think COVID taught us that. So nationally, I don't know who's in charge. Really, nobody's in charge. That we would tie these players to contracts, and that would require them to play in the bowl games.
I hope that happens, Mark, but I'm not optimistic about it because the ESPN and Fox, which everybody in their conspiracy theory thinks controls and runs the sport, have just let this issue go on for 10 years now. So I'm not confident that anybody's really going to get their act together.
We are at a place, DeReal, where Cam Ward, and I'm not criticizing Cam Ward because he certainly is a top 5 NFL draft selection, could have sat out of this bowl game, but they're in the heat of this like 31-28 game, and he played the first half, and he might have played the first series of the second half, and then he's standing on the sideline, and the ball game's 31-28, and he's not going to play the rest of the game. I don't know if I applaud that or not. I may have, as a head coach, have said, you don't want to play the whole game, you're not playing at all. I don't know what my decision would have been there. I think that they were hoping to have a lead, but they don't have a defense. Therefore, they gave up 4 touchdowns to Iowa State in the first half. And lo and behold, they went ahead and did what Miami does, and they lost another postseason game in the final 45 seconds of the game. And Cam Ward, of course, was on the sideline for the entire second half, in which they scored, I believe, 1 touchdown.
Right. Somebody else I'm very impressed with and nobody's talking about because the Indiana story or very few people are talking about is Vanderbilt. Clark Lee's done an amazing job at Vanderbilt. I mean, I don't know how much of that bowl game you watched. They destroyed Georgia Tech, and then there was a weird weather delay, and Georgia Tech, after the weather delay, came back into the game but never really had a chance. What do you think about Clark Lee at Vanderbilt and just the job they've done? In my opinion, that's another one of those teams that put them in the Big 12, heck, put them in the ACC, and they could win those leagues. They've done more, in my opinion, to be in the playoffs this year than any Big 12 and ACC team. But, Mark, what are your thoughts?
Well, I have taken something that Clark Lee said before or during SEC Media Days a couple summers ago and had some fun with it from time to time, because as soon as he said it, I thought, what in the world does he mean? But I took it and ran with it, in which he said, we are going to have the greatest football program in the country. What I think he meant in saying that was that the combination of the football was going to be raised to a level that if you put it together with the academics and the culture and everything else at Vanderbilt, that they would have the best experience for a football player than anywhere in the country for those football players that care about, the rest of the college experience. So I kind of got him, but when he said the greatest football program in America, and then they went out and got blown out 8 consecutive SEC games and went 2-10, and I had fun with that for a couple of years. But he has proven to be an extremely capable coach, considering when has Vanderbilt, I have seen, and you have, a number of Vandy's top players been plucked away through the transfer portal, but I've not seen anyone significant outside of the quarterback, Diego Pavia, that has been an addition to Vandy. I'm sure that they've had a couple here and there, but largely they have been plundered by the transfer portal. And of course, they recruit as well as a top third team in the Big 12 or the ACC, but compared to the SEC, they're getting hammered in recruiting. And he has been able to somehow build a culture / game plan well enough to, Georgia Tech, Virginia Tech, those are 2 pretty substantial ACC wins. Those 2 wins are better. Let's think about this. Are as good as Miami's 2 best wins in the ACC this year. They beat Virginia Tech and Georgia Tech. Miami beat Virginia Tech and Louisville. Georgia Tech beat Miami. Vandy had 2 cracks at the ACC, and they posted 2 wins as good as Miami's 2.
Right, Mark, but Alabama shouldn't be in the playoffs because they lost to Vanderbilt.
That's looking better and better and better and better.
Yeah, Vanderbilt, actually pretty good football team.
And we were all astonished at what Georgia Tech was able to do against Georgia a couple weeks ago. And we were talking about how good Georgia Tech is or how bad Georgia might be. Well, Georgia Tech's truly, and I don't think anyone's going to sell them on a day-to-day basis as being as good as Georgia, but they did play that game and played it rather well. So that's what they're capable of doing. And Vandy, as you said, I did not watch the game. This is one of these games that theoretically I want to go and watch, but I saw that they were in control of the game throughout the game. What was their weather situation there? Just heavy rains, lightning?
Yeah, it was basically like a monsoon came in for like a 30 minutes to an hour, I want to say. And it just completely stopped the game. It was 35-13 at that point, or maybe 30. Yeah, I think 35-13. And then Georgia Tech scored a few touchdowns to make it close.
And just to continue to validate the Vanderbilt position in this, I was the dummy that picked Georgia Tech to win the game because look at their resume over the last month. They beat Miami. They played on equal terms with Georgia, of course, and they looked good down the stretch. But they got blown away by Vandy.
Yeah, Mark, we got some time management / dumb decisions being made. Lincoln Riley, do you think he went to the Les Miles School of Time Management?
This really surprises me out of Lincoln Riley because I don't remember any of these issues coming up while he was at Oklahoma or his first year at USC, but he's had a number of these issues throughout his USC stay here the last couple of years. And I don't know what the issue is because he's the type coach. All you have to do is watch a Les Miles operate and listen to him speak and know his background. And you know that he comes from a certain lane, a certain path to become a top-notch college football coach. Lincoln Riley comes from a very different path. If you follow me, there are more cerebral paths than others. And Lincoln Riley has the reputation of coming up a cerebral path as an offensive innovator and mind. So with that, you would anticipate time management to be a strength. And it's not been a strength. I'm not that aware of the situation, though, from last night.
So at the end of the first half, it was about a minute left to go. And they were just outside the red zone. I want to say around 30, maybe 35. So it's 1 minute to go. They run the ball or throw it short of the first down. So what do? They take it all the way down to 30 seconds. And with 7 seconds on a play clock, call a timeout. Okay? I'm not joking. And then they go for it on 3rd and 3, and they don't get it. It's 4th and 1. So Lincoln Riley doesn't wait for the game clock to hit 3 seconds and call a timeout. He calls the timeout immediately and has 18 seconds on the clock. So those are 2 examples of just terrible, horrendous time management.
Yeah, that's awful. That is right in Mario Cristobal's wheelhouse.
And then their counterpart, Oklahoma, Mark, in a 21-20 game, why do you go for it? Go for 2?
I don't know, because statistically, even though that was a near tie game, Oklahoma, I watched every play of that game. Even with 25 opt-outs, they were athletically better. They could run the ball. They were just a better team on the field. They made so many stupid mistakes that you go to overtime and you play and let your athletes go and win the game. Especially with a very erratic, inexperienced quarterback, you don't trust him to make it. And of course, he's backpedaling and running around for his life and gets sacked. No, you don't trust that kind. You don't have, this is not, Bryce Young running the offense from the 2-yard line. That was a dumb decision.
Clearly wasn't Bryce Young if you look at the game. I mean, that one play he made in the first quarter where he rolled it out left and then rolled it back right and threw it right down the field and had a, 50-some yard touchdown pass. That was a cool play, but outside of that, horrible. He wasn't that good.
No.
What do you think about this bowl season overall? Because outside of the playoff games for me, these bowl games have been fantastic. We've had a lot of close games, a lot of high-scoring games, a lot of good excitement. I think this has been one of the better bowl seasons over the past few years. What are your thoughts?
Well, you may have heard my comments off the top. I've been more and more disengaged with bowl season the last few years than I have been ever. I've always taken pride in watching the bowl games, love the bowl games, watch the bowl games, et cetera, et cetera. But just because of the way life has gone and my time commitments this particular week, when most of the bowl games are played between Christmas and New Year's, I then am in this quandary of I've got a to-do list that's like 87 miles long to catch up here on the Voice of College Football. And do I watch these bowl games and evaluate these bowl games knowing that number one, nobody cares. Nobody's going to watch a recap on a bowl game. I'm watching this simply for my own knowledge and my own pleasure. And I have a big issue with my enjoyment of sports goes beyond just the sheer enjoyment of watching the event. It has to do with how important is this? Do I buy into this situation? And I have a struggle with the validity of these bowl games. And I know people have raised this for quite a few years, and I've kind of defended bowl games and the validity of these games. Now, as long as they're going to count them in the win-loss column, I don't think there's any excuse that should be given. But just legitimately, when Oklahoma has 25 opt-outs and Navy, I assume, is bringing everyone, I don't know how valid that is. Now, that's not an excuse. Navy gets credit for the win. Oklahoma, figure out how to keep your team on the field, all of that. But in terms of, real life validity of these games, that's what I struggle with. Again, with these games. And as I mentioned a few minutes ago, I don't necessarily need to bring a great knowledge of these bowl games to the table because nobody wants to talk about them by and large. They want to talk about the playoff games.
Yeah, it's weird. Oh, it's weird to me. Everybody wants to talk about the games that I believe are going to be blowouts, like Penn State, Boise State, and all the first round games. Have you seen that talking point I'm seeing is just put out by ESPN and Fox, all the stuff. This is like the first round is like the wild card round, and that's when all the blowouts happen. So later and later we go in this playoffs. The game should get closer and closer. Have you seen that talking point?
I have, and it makes no sense. First of all, the NFL playoffs have not displayed that. That has not been, yes, there is the random going through the current format or the previous format of NFL playoffs that I was more familiar with. Yes, the Houston Texans making the playoffs at 9-7, getting blown out in the first round because they really weren't that good and played in a weak AFC South. Yes, there were random situations like that. But because of the bye system in the NFL, we are still at, are we at one bye currently in the NFL in East Conference?
Correct. It was 2, but they got rid of
two.
them when they
Yes.
expanded it to 7.
Yes. So now, and then there have been other series of situations with the NFL playoffs in which you basically have lesser teams. You don't have the cream of the crop. And at one point for a long, long time, I believe from 2002 up until just a few years ago, we're talking about the 6 teams in the conference and the top 2 don't play. You have very seeded and very comparable teams playing in the NFL playoffs. And that would have to be proven to me that the NFL wildcard round is a bunch of blowouts, because that is not my recollection of those games.
It's not mine either. And also the other end of it is we're going to have, in my opinion, at least 50% of this round is going to be blowouts because, let's be honest, Arizona State doesn't have a chance, Mark. Boise State doesn't have a chance. Like, they shouldn't even belong in this field. They're not one of the 12 best teams. Why did the committee rank them as top 12 teams? Like, if we reseed the playoffs, they better not be ranked as the top 12. If we just had a 1 through 12 ranking system, do you think the College Football Playoff Committee would rank them in the top 12?
Well, they just did.
Right, but I'm saying I think it was done because they know the structure. And they know that 4 conference champions have to get in. So it's easier for them to justify it if they're ranked in the top 12.
So it doesn't matter if Boise State is ranked outside the top 25. They're going to be in the playoff, of course, based on their conference championship as the top group of 5. But to your point, I believe that the committee lives in this world of half we honor records regardless of how we evaluate these teams, but then we also evaluate these teams. So that's kind of the tiebreaker. The tiebreaker is if there's a final spot to be had and BYU's 10-2 and Alabama's 9-3, then it's going to go to Alabama. But other than that, we are going to have this evaluation that has more to do with basically honoring the conferences and the championships, of course, but also just having a better record in a power conference.
I got you. I got to respond to one of the comments because, I like calling out foolishness. A wet blanket? Why do you believe Texas doesn't, Arizona State has a chance because Texas has only won the Big 12 in the last 15 years? What the heck does that have to do with anything? Mark, can you explain that one to me?
Yes, this Texas team is much different than the Texas team that Charlie Strong and Tom Herman were coaching. Yes, this Texas team obviously almost went to the national championship game last year, played Georgia to the wire to overtime this year, beat Alabama last. We just know that this is one of the 5 best teams in America. So this is not a team, that's like we can make all sorts of examples of teams and programs across the country that have nothing to do their quality today versus what they were 5 or 10 years ago.
I get you, Mark. And that's the reason I call out that comment. That's a general Big 12 talking point I've seen throughout the land. And it makes no logical sense, but people just parry it.
What, that Texas couldn't do anything in the Big 12?
Yeah, for the last 10, 15 years. Therefore, Arizona State this year has a legit chance of beating them. Some people I've even seen in their videos say dominating them. I mean, come on. It's ridiculous.
Yeah. Well, I can understand the Big 12 fan taking some pride in Texas entering the SEC and winning this year. However, that would have been much more sweeter and would have been much more valid had Texas directly left as a mediocre team in the Big 12 and then won the SEC or come close to winning the SEC. They were the 1 seed, of course, in the conference championship game, rather than them scoring 59 points to win the Big 12 championship game and obliterate the league last year. So that's the Texas that should have been playing the previous seasons, but of course they were mismanaged and not properly coached. But that's the Texas that the Big 12 would have to contend with this year.
Yeah. Also, Mark, my analysis for the Boise State-Arizona State game, line of scrimmage is going to be favored so heavily by the Penn State-Texas side, nothing else matters. Like, literally nothing else matters. What do you think about that analysis?
Yeah, well, that's where it all starts. And even though football has changed considerably and there's more emphasis on the perimeter and a lot of great offensive minds, Mike Leach and others have tried to do their best to move the center of the game away from the line of scrimmage and get the ball out of the quarterback's hands. You can only fool a team and you can only execute 4-yard passes for so long that, yes, it's still a point of attack, line of scrimmage game. And Penn State and Texas are superior than those other teams, even on the perimeter. Even though Penn State does not have an outstanding wide receiver core, Texas does, of course. So they're better than those teams, even where the gap is closer, meaning defensive back, wide receiver, running back. Penn State and Texas are still superior teams even there, but they are vastly superior teams at the line of scrimmage. Vastly. Look at the games from last week, especially, of course, since we had a Penn State and former Group of 5 SMU team. And sure, Kevin Jennings threw Penn State the ball a few times that made it much easier. But Penn State rammed the ball down their throats at 7 yards per clip for their 2 running backs and had no issue with Brashard Smith, who was a 1,300-yard rusher in the ACC, who ran for less than 3 yards per carry.
Right. The final thing I'll say, Mark, is these bowl games, they don't matter unless A, your team wins, or B, your rival loses. That's when it matters. Anyway, good talking to you.
Thanks, Real. Appreciate it. We will keep it rolling here at the Voice of College Football, and we will get to Sandstorm and Chris in 2 seconds, but we got our buddy Neil Campbell stopping by. Neil, we so much appreciate you. Thank you so much for stopping by. You are amazing, and Nevada now deserves a place on the shelf. Hang on. Oh, where are you? Nevada. There you go. Georgia. Screw Georgia. Who's Georgia? Let's give Nevada some prominence, if you in fact can see that. I know I'm in the dark tonight. I don't know if that bothers anyone, but it's just a bit easier on the eyes not to have a light shining in my face for 3 hours. And again, as I noted off the top, I'm fine, feel good, but don't feel at 100%. Neil, thank you so much for that. And I guess I should read your super chat. As much as I trash on Boise for being a giant community college, I'm going to say it's anyone's game, Boise and Penn State. I'll say it this way, Neil, that of course people are going to look at the Boise State game against Oregon. Was it a valid result? Of course it was. The 2 teams played. They were healthy at the time. It was the second game of the season, and that was at Autzen Stadium, and Boise State basically played as well against Oregon as Ohio State did, to a certain extent, down to the last play of the game. But history will tell us, and the performance of these teams, even this season, will tell us that most likely Penn State will win this game significantly. Do I expect it to be 52-0? No. There will be points scored on both sides. It could be 17-14 at half. But I believe that Penn State is a significantly better team. Penn State will have to play a bad game to lose. Boise State will have to play a great game to win. Could it happen? Absolutely, it can happen. I will give Boise State a solid 20% chance of winning this game. 20%. That's, I think, where we are. Penn State is one of the 6 or 7 best teams in the country, and Boise State is more like the 25th best team in the country. So, yes, it's possible. I would not be shocked if we're sitting here on New Year's Eve and Penn State had just lost, especially with James Franklin on the sideline, had just lost to Boise State. I will be somewhat surprised. But thank you so much for the super chat. Folks, we appreciate your super chat contributions. We will get to those. And also, actually, Venmo, PayPal, and Cash App are the most effective way to contribute here at the Voice of College Football. Venmo, PayPal, and Cash App. We would appreciate that. You can get those links down in the description section. And also keep in mind that when you shop on Amazon, and I know that this being the holiday season, even though you've already shopped for Christmas, of course, that there's a lot of returns and exchanges and people are looking for deals after Christmas. When you shop on Amazon, please use the link that we provide in the description section. It is the same shopping experience. I told somebody the other day, this was about a month ago, when somebody suggested, they said, you know, this Amazon link, you need to cut a video. You need to cut a step-by-step video to explain to people how easy this is and show them how Amazon immediately, instantaneously recognizes them in their account, and that by using your link, it is exactly the same. And I said, you know what? I did that one time live, once or twice. I did that live, but I do need to cut a video. And I actually told this person, who is a good friend of the show, I actually told this person, I said, if I don't get this, I said, you are completely right. People need to be shown what to do. Me sitting here talking about it every live stream does absolutely no good. And we continue to make like $25 a month on the Amazon link. So my thanks to those people who are using the Amazon link, and therefore we do make $25 a month on the Amazon link. But we should make $2,000 a month on the Amazon link. So I said to them, you are completely right. I need to post something. I need to cut this. This needs to be a priority. And if I don't get this done by the end of this day, I am an idiot. Well, do you know what I am? I'm an idiot because I still haven't done it. So there we go. Neil, thank you so much for that contribution. All right, next up here at the Voice of College Football, we've got Sandstorm on the line.
What's going on, man?
Not too much. How you doing?
I'm good. I've been watching some of these games. Your comments about the bowls not mattering, I don't know. I think they kind of do, especially watching the Miami game. I know you're split on Cam Ward because he did come out at halftime, but in my opinion, I think he definitely increased his draft stock even more because he played really, really good that first half. There really wasn't a need for him to keep playing the whole game.
There was no need for him to keep playing. His team needed him to keep playing.
I agree with that, but I mean, even I was curious, what is this team going to look like next year? Because 3 of his best wide receivers didn't play, and he was still lighting it up. And I'm thinking like, okay, I see Cam's still Cam, but what's that other quarterback look like? What are they going to look like next year? He didn't look terrible. He's not Cam Ward, obviously, but he's not terrible. They lost the nail biter. I mean, it was the same way they've lost most of those 2 games that they lost this year. So really, I don't think it really affected the outcome of the game too much. Now, you switch that over.
You don't think it affected the outcome of the game that Cam Ward left?
No, because they've lost the same this whole season.
They scored 31 points in the first half, and they scored 10 in the second half.
So you're telling me that because he came out at halftime, they lost the game?
I don't know.
That's what I'm trying to say.
Anyone would be a moron to make some kind of hang on just a second, please. Anyone, in my opinion, would be a moron that would make a declaration as to who would win a game based on personnel changes that we don't know. We don't know. That's what I'm saying. We don't know.
Saying
but we can make an estimation. We can conjecture that, yes, when the best quarterback in the country leaves the game and is replaced by a marginal backup quarterback who has played in the past. So we know how good Emory Williams is. He's played enough. He played the full Clemson game last year. He played the full Florida State game last year. So he has played meaningful games against good teams. We know that he's, and I'm not saying that he can't have room to develop and get better and develop through the offseason and become a much better quarterback in 2025, but that's a significant drop-off. And I don't want to discredit Iowa State because everybody has, they were missing their second and third wide receivers in that game. So I'm not discrediting or invalidating or trying to take away anybody's wins in a bowl game. But no, that is the last thing I want to do. I am just saying that there are so many opt-outs in these games. And I have actually been one of the last people to come around to this. I have fought this when 5 years ago, people were saying these bowl games are meaningless. Look at how many people opted out. And I was like, still trying to validate these bowl games. And I don't have an answer for you because each game's different. And that's part of my problem is we can't say, well, they're all invalid or they're all valid. They're all over the place. That's my point.
Well, I wasn't trying to basically the point I was trying to make. I haven't made yet, but regardless, Miami still looked like the same Miami they have the entire season. I do get your point that pulling a starting quarterback out that's one of the best QBs in the country has an effect on the game. I'm not saying that. I know it sounds like I'm saying that, but Miami still looked like the same Miami they have the entire season, even without Cam in the second half of the game. I mean, they just didn't look any different. They still went up and down the field. They still look like Miami, and they still lost the nail biter just like they did in their two losses that they had. The point I was trying to make, though, was you flip this over to the Colorado game, which I just finished watching right before you went live. I'm watching an entire team that did not opt out because Prime went ahead and got that insurance policy for them so they would all play, and they got absolutely annihilated. And Shador, in my opinion, hurt his draft stock. I mean, at one point, he took a 26-yard sack to put the field goal kicker in a worse position in which he missed the field goal. Travis Hunter was pretty much ineffective the whole game. He had 4 tackles total on the game and then 4 receptions. He did catch a touchdown. But, I mean, they would have been better off opting out and not hurting his draft stock. I think Cam Ward improved his draft stock with his performance with his 3 top receivers out, and I think Shador hurt his. I don't think Shador will be the number 1 pick anymore.
So I did not see the Colorado-BYU game. I don't know that I will see it because there are other games I want to catch up on. But I was intrigued to see that because of the obvious. 2 of the best players in the country because of the insurance policy. And I have some level of respect for Deion Sanders to want his entire team and his best players to show up, but also understanding the business side. So he ensured that. Now, in a sense, he looks foolish because they didn't play well and they didn't win and they got blown out by a team inside their conference, which I find also another intriguing slant to that game is that we had 2 teams from the same conference playing in a bowl game because they didn't get to play during the regular season.
That was interesting.
Yeah. And they were 2 teams that fought on the final weekend of the season were in play to go to the conference championship game. So they're very like-seeded teams. And shoot, we both know, I think, that they could play 10 times and who knows what the results would be, but they only played once. BYU was much better. So I respect Deion Sanders for doing that. And I give a lot of legitimacy to that game because the best players played and then it's a valid result.
It was literally probably the best valid result of what would have happened during the regular season because there was no starters that really sat out for either team. Every single other bowl game that we've had so far, there's been starters that's opted out. This one, there was none. It was both teams battling it out. They both had something to prove. They both thought they should have had a playoff game, appearance. And Colorado got absolutely worked. I mean, it was horrible.
So we're looking at the scoring drives for Miami in this game. So from the get-go, I don't know if you saw all this game, but I watched every play basically. And so the center, Zach Carpenter, made a bad snap on the first play of the game. So Cam Ward missed a possession right there. It wasn't his fault. There was a horrible snap. They fumbled. First play of the game, boom. They're down 7-0. So forget that because he didn't get to operate the offense. His Miami team went with Cam Ward operating the offense, went touchdown, 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 and then somebody fumbled. And then they got a field goal at the end of the half when they didn't have enough time to.
Yeah, they were up 31-28 at the half, and then Cam didn't
they were
come back out.
unstoppable.
But see, like there's been a lot of hype talk about Shedeur is going to be the number 1 overall pick. I just don't see how he could be the number 1 overall pick when Cam went out there with 3 less receivers, but 3 of his starters out, still lit the scoreboard up. Shedeur goes out there with his entire team intact and gets absolutely annihilated.
And that's one comparison.
And he looked really bad doing it.
I'm not arguing with you because I don't know who is a better prospect for the pros because I don't really follow. I love the NFL draft. I don't follow the scouting of the NFL draft. I heard a comment made during today's bowl game. I think it was by Cole Kubelik that Cam Ward had more ceiling, but Shedeur Sanders was a more polished quarterback now. That's the comment that he made.
Right.
I've seen both of them play considerable football, and I think that they're both exceptional. And you make a valid point in that in this one day, Cam Ward was a much better player. But
well, if you're looking at the competition that both of those teams played, regardless of the fact that ACC has looked really bad this year, especially in the bowl season. I mean, they're not the ACC is down bad right now because of the bowl season. But as far as the teams that they've played, Colorado really didn't play any legitimate competition. They still had 3 losses. BYU was their first like real strong competition they've pretty much had all year.
Kansas State,
and it was bad. Kansas State was really bad until the end of the year.
Kansas State was really bad. I don't know that Kansas State's much of a separation from BYU.
I'm thinking about the Jayhawks. My bad.
Yeah, so Colorado lost to Kansas State. Trying to think who else they played.
They got blown out by Nebraska, but Nebraska was up and down, I guess.
Yeah, I think Miami's a better football team than Colorado, certainly.
No, absolutely. But I mean, there was a lot of hype about, Shedeur's going to be the number 1 pick. And I'm like, after watching both of these bowl games that they both played in, I'm like, I don't see how Shedeur could be the number 1 pick after that, because I think it might have been better for him to actually opt out and probably try to get that number 1 overall pick. I think he hurt his draft stock today. He looked really bad.
Cam Ward does play behind a much better offensive line.
That's true.
All right, sir. Anything else you got going?
No, that was pretty much it. I mean, if you want to talk about Clemson, since I'm a South Carolina fan, you can. I don't think they're going to be worth a crap next year, but that's my opinion.
So give us the rundown on why you say that in an unbiased way. Why is Clemson not going to be worth a crap next year?
2019, 1 loss, 2020, 2 losses, 2023, 3 losses, 2024. I mean, they've lost 1 game or added an extra loss every single year since the last national title. Yes, Dabo is slightly using the portal, granted, not really using the portal the way he should. They looked very one-dimensional against Texas. They really need a running back really bad out of that portal, and he just doesn't seem to be very interested in that at all. Cade is pretty much their best option. If Klubnik comes back, they'll at least have a decent offense. The defense is getting worse every year. I mean, they're on track to go 5 losses next year, and the rest of the ACC is catching up to them.
Well, I can't disagree with anything that you just said. Phil Moff is a good back. Obviously, he's gone. I got to think he's been playing forever.
Yeah, he's already declared for the draft.
They could not run the ball. Of course, he wasn't able to play much against Texas. I think he only had 2 carries. They couldn't run the ball. And yeah, basically, Cade Klubnik and 2 receivers kept them in the game. The rest of the team was completely overmatched by Texas. Yes. And they were fortunate to beat SMU. They were completely outclassed in the fourth quarter against SMU. Clemson did not impress me the entire season. The best team in the regular season they beat was Pitt. It was the best team they beat.
Yeah, I agree. It took a miraculous call to run Cade Klubnik on that last near the end of the game where he ran off that long run for that
Yeah.
touchdown. Had they not made that call, they lose that game, plain and simple. As far as what they got going into next year, I don't know, man. They don't have a running back. I mean, Moffitt's gone now. There's no stable back there. As far as the SMU game, had the SMU quarterback not gave them a couple of turnovers early in that game, they probably don't win that.
So when we talk about turnovers, I know one of the turnovers, I'm not going to blame him for that. When one of the best defensive ends in the country comes around the corner and sabotages the play and strips the ball from the quarterback, that's a great defensive play.
Yeah. I mean, look, Clemson won it. They won the ACC. That's great. Good for them. It's just, I don't think they're going to get lucky like that going forward. Like they're looking like they're going to have 5 losses next year.
Yeah,
The trend that they're on
sure
points directly to 5 losses.
I understand your point. I have
So,
no comeback to that at all.
but if you
And
ask some of these Clemson YouTubers and things like that, they're going, "Oh, this team's going to be hard to beat next year," and I'm going, "Where?"
And they definitely benefited from not having to play Miami or SMU in the regular season.
Yeah. All right. Those are all the points I had, man. You have a good night, man. I enjoy your show.
Appreciate you being here. Thanks.
Yeah, man.
All right, let's keep it rolling here at the Voice of College Football. Looks like we've got a lot of good chat here in the chat here at the Voice of College Football. Appreciate you being here on a Saturday night after all the bowl games. All right, let's keep it rolling. If you've got a comment for me, please use the super chat option, and we will hear from our buddy Chris. Chris, what's going on tonight?
Hey, Mark.
How are you?
Good. How are you?
I am doing just fine.
A little bit of a bone to pick. Not with you, I don't think. You tend to be a little bit closer to what I see as reality. I don't mind necessarily the real MVP. He's promoting in a way, it's not bad to put. I did what I think is a fairly reasonable, comprehensive too, survey of the Southeast Conference, and I believe that I had as many as 10 teams ranked pretty high, which means that the remaining 6, which would have been the 500 teams, they were just marginal, I guess, but still pretty good. I mean, I'm not going to say that Vanderbilt wasn't any good just because they finished 6-6, and I think Oklahoma being 6-6, I mean, I'm sure that's not where they want to be, but at the same time, I see that they. You made a statement I think that I somewhat agree with. I mean, maybe they aren't motivated to play in Navy. I don't know. I don't know much about Oklahoma. I don't know. That might not be a game they care much about, in all fairness. But on the other side of it,
May
I
I
mean,
interrupt real quick, Chris? Just to clarify my statement, maybe I wasn't clear. I'm in no way questioning Oklahoma's motivation, that the players on the field were not trying. I would never say that unless I physically saw guys jogging or not wanting to tackle. I didn't see that. I'm just saying that they had 25 players on their roster opt out of the game and enter the transfer portal.
I might actually be saying it, but anyway. So I don't even know what bowl, Independence Bowl, I guess. I'm not sure exactly what bowl it was. No, it
That was
the
the Armed Forces Bowl,
Armed
I
Forces
do
Bowl,
believe.
which that's the second tier bowl, or maybe even lower.
I might be wrong. I'll double check that.
You're right. I think it is. It's the Armed Forces. It was Lockheed Martin. Anyway, I don't know. I'm not around them enough to know whether these players care about these games, but I kind of get it hurts me a little bit. If the people really didn't want the bowl games, then I don't think they'd be there. That's kind of where I look at it. But maybe people outside the bowls aren't interested. But I kind of don't really buy completely into the argument that everybody's all pumped and geared for the playoffs because that's the professional angle, which I know that college football is kind of moving that direction to, I guess, its own benefit. I don't know, Mark, but I think we're losing something. I mean, maybe everybody's going to really like the playoffs. Maybe they'll even want more of them. Honestly, I'm not close enough to it to see whether people are, but I did see that the viewership was only about, I think, less than half of what the typical CFP game gets for the opening round. It was like right around half, I think, for a quarterfinal as opposed to a semifinal. So I mean, that might explain the
Okay.
reason. But
There are two easy explanations for that. One would be if you expand a playoff, that means that the first round games are going to have less significance. Therefore, you are going to have an average of less viewers rather than just having a semifinal when you have the four best teams in the country playing and the ratings are going to be massive. If you go out to 12 teams, you're going to have lesser teams playing in less meaningful matchups. Therefore, you are going to have an average rating that is going to decline, if that makes sense. Number one. Number two, they were competing against the NFL, and that's not been the case in the past.
okay. Well,
The NFL games were getting 15 to 18 million viewers. Regular season NFL games completely squashed. People in our chat probably don't like to hear that, but those are the facts. The NFL games, I don't even know who played. The doubleheader squashed the college football playoff games.
Well, I don't even know, Mark. That really wasn't what I was trying to tell you, but my concern, we can talk, it's the Rose Bowl. Well, it's also a quarterfinal or whatever. I don't know. I just kind of, we're losing something, but I guess we don't have to go there. That's kind of maybe another kind of a point to make about the playoffs or whatever. But I'm not real super pumped about these games coming up. I mean, I'm just speaking for myself. I'd rather see a traditional Fiesta Bowl that Boise State maybe against I don't know who they play, but I don't really care about Penn State. I mean, that's just who I am. But
what is
I'm
a
glad they're there.
traditional Fiesta Bowl?
No, I'm glad they're there. That's fine.
What is
Well, I don't know.
please define for me, what is a traditional Fiesta Bowl? What is that?
One year it was TCU and Boise State. That was
Well, I know who's played in the Fiesta Bowl every year. I have that between my ears. I just don't know what a traditional Fiesta Bowl is. They've had no conference tie-ins. Do you know that Penn State has played in 7 Fiesta Bowls?
Yeah, I knew that. I went to one of them.
Okay.
So yeah, I saw him play Texas the year that Texas beat Nebraska. It was like 97 or something like that.
Yeah, 38-15.
Yeah,
yes.
I went to that. I went to that Fiesta Bowl, so I
okay. So why is Penn State not a traditional Fiesta Bowl team? Like, I don't even know what that means. I don't know I know what a traditional Rose Bowl is. It's the Pac-12 against the Big Ten. I know what a traditional Sugar Bowl is. It's the SEC against an at-large team. I don't know what a traditional Fiesta Bowl is.
My guess is it might include Arizona State, maybe Arizona State against Boise State. I don't know, Mark. I don't set the pairing, so I mean,
well, just because they play in that region.
Yeah, mostly.
Okay, I mean, that has not been the history of the Fiesta Bowl, though. The Fiesta Bowl has had all sorts. Ohio State's played in a ton of Fiesta Bowls.
No, I understand where you're coming from. I'm not saying you're wrong at all.
I'm not trying to pick on you. I'm just
nothing wrong with the Boise State versus Penn State pairing. I'm not saying it's a bad pairing. That isn't what gets me all,
You don't think that Notre Dame, Georgia, or Ohio State, Oregon, that those are intriguing matchups?
I don't know that I said that, did I? I just said that.
Well, you just said that you were not excited about this round of games.
You said everybody's going to be, when that happens, I'll be right with you if that's what really happens. I kind of think
that's who's playing. It will happen. Well, I'm Chris. I'm not trying to argue with you. I'm just trying to get clarity here. You were not excited about this round of games, but we've got Georgia and Notre Dame playing in Ohio State and Oregon.
Other way, we have the bowl games and we have the playoffs.
Yes.
And to me, they're not even comparable. They're two entirely different things.
Yes.
They don't really even relate to each other that I can tell.
I agree.
And my guess would be that the attention's going to be at the playoffs, whether they should or shouldn't. That's just kind of how it's going to be, which is fine. But that's not necessarily where I'm interested in
Okay.
putting my attention, but
You have every right to put your attention wherever you want.
So let it be however it is, but there's probably some truth to the fact that the teams that are expected to win will probably win. I don't expect Arizona State to beat Texas, but it wouldn't surprise me if they gave them a game. Or, I don't think Georgia's going to beat Notre Dame, but it wouldn't surprise me if they did. And as far as Boise State, that's almost like playing in. They're pretty. What is their record in the Fiesta Bowl, Mark? Isn't it 3-0 or something like that?
Well, they beat Oklahoma, they beat TCU, and I'm trying to think another game.
They beat Arizona in a Fiesta Bowl.
Yes, they did. 2014. Correct. Yeah. 3-0, it sounds like.
Okay. And maybe Penn State 7-0. I don't know. Maybe they're like 7-0.
I think they are, aren't they? They beat USC. They beat Miami for a national championship, of course. They beat the Texas game that you witnessed. And
saw that game. And they dominated that game.
They beat Memphis a couple of years ago. No, that was the Cotton Bowl. Anyway, I'm not going to try to recite all of Penn State's Fiesta Bowl appearances, but we understand that those games have nothing to do with what we're going to witness in a few days. Just because Boise State's 3-0 in the Fiesta Bowl, that has nothing to do with what they're going to do on New Year's Eve.
I don't know. I've always been taught that the best way to predict a result is look at past results. But that was one reason why I was kind of hoping that BYU might be in it, because they only lost one game to Texas, and that game they almost won. And they would be like 5-0 against Texas. But, of course, they lost Arizona State, so that kind of took care of that. But
well, what you just said about past results is valid to various degrees. It depends on the team and the program.
Well, agreed, but I mean, you're going to tell me that BYU beating Texas 4 out of 5 times doesn't apply to this year? I guess that's okay, but
no, it doesn't apply to this
year.
How many
times do we have to beat them before it becomes important? But anyway, that's okay.
Well, I'm not invalidating previous teams and their results. I'm just saying that this Texas team, most of those players weren't even born during some of those matchups.
Sure. No, I agree. They don't directly compare at all. I mean, you're right about that. But
and I think you would agree that there are some programs who go through ebb and flow of tremendous highs, tremendous lows. Look at Colorado, national championship team in 1990, very low status throughout the last 20 years for the most part. They've been all over the place. Stanford's been all over the place. Now, when you bring up Ohio State, well, you're pretty much getting the same program for the last 25 years.
I agree. But, Colorado doesn't – I don't know that they put football number one, though. I mean, I understand what you're saying, but they don't necessarily – that isn't where they really – I mean, I could be wrong. Maybe – I think they care, but I actually thought hiring Deion Sanders was kind of a strange decision. I don't know that I would have made that decision personally, but – and I don't know that it's really working out. I mean, people can say it is, but what are they, 8-4 this year, something like that?
It looks pretty good to me. They went from 1-11 to 4-8 to 8-4.
Well,
no, pardon me. They're 9-3, 9-4 now with a bowl loss.
They're 9-4, so they have one more. Okay. Well, I mean, that's a good record, sure, but I don't know. I mean, my guess would be that you get the right coach in there. I'm sure that changes everything. Don't get me wrong, and I'm sure he's as good a coach as they could possibly hope for. But didn't he bring in all his Jackson State players? Isn't that kind of where they leaned really heavily upon his team, which he helped create from, brought them into Colorado. And then I think he's brought in a whole bunch of transfer students is what I think he did, which is good. But it's not what I consider to be, like, I prefer it when, well, I don't even know what to say about it, Mark. I don't like it when everything becomes so commercialized that it's the Colorado brand, but it's like players from all over the place. And so it's like, what part of it's Colorado? Just other than the school. But anyway, that's neither here nor there. That's kind of that doesn't really matter, I guess. But, I'll look forward to see these games, these coming up games and all that. I'm sure the best 4 teams will advance, so that's good. I guess I'm just not sold on the playoff. I just don't think it really helps anything. If you want to know who I have as far as the number 1 and 2, it's Oregon and Notre Dame. And the other thing I might want to just tell you, because you kind of ragged on Indiana. I had them, I think, as the third. I had them as high as I could possibly get them without being in. In other words, when Notre Dame played Indiana, that was the highest rated team I had in the playoff. So I think the fact that Notre Dame beat them pretty good says something about how good Notre Dame is. Oh, and then the last thing,
Indiana, you lost me on that last statement. Indiana was the highest rated team that what?
represented to the playoffs besides Oregon and Notre Dame.
Oh, Indiana was number 3 in your rankings.
Well, yeah, I guess you could say my rankings, but I think it's as
Okay,
far
let's
as
not get into that conversation. Yes, whatever you pull from to make
in the
your
last
rankings
thing.
or somebody else's rankings.
Well, no, the real MVP, he kind of said something about it, so I think I have at least have a right to respond to it. Oh, how'd the committee? How'd they get the? Oh, how'd they get these 12? Those are the 12 teams I said should be there. Now you can say I'm full of shit or whatever.
Who
I
are
don't
your
know
12 teams that should have been in the playoff?
12 that are in the playoff.
Oh, so you agreed with the committee,
not in the seedings, no, but
not in
yeah,
the
those are
seedings.
the teams.
Okay, but you had the same 12
You
teams.
know what? The thing to kind of
Okay.
the feather in my cap, I think, not to brag, I had Army rated ahead of, so Army had to lose. It came right down to Army even having to lose to Navy for Tennessee to go. So I'm not. It's not like I picked the teams, but yeah, the 12 teams I said should be there are the 12 teams that are in there. So,
Okay,
well, I
very
mean,
good.
whatever you want to say about it. I mean, I don't know.
So your rankings said that Indiana was the third best team in the country at the end of the
Real
regular season.
why they picked the 12? Well, I think I know how to rank teams, and the 12 teams that I said should be there are the 12 teams that advance. So, whatever you want to say about it, maybe you can say that's just luck of the draw. But
Well, I don't think it's lucky at all. I think that you must have a system. Certainly you have many times brought to the table your rankings or whoever rankings they are. I don't want to get into that argument about your rankings, somebody else's rankings, whatever they are.
yeah,
And sometimes they sound
well, I'm not
very
sure.
credible, and at other times they sound
Incredible.
way off.
Well, it doesn't really matter to me. I'm just telling you that the 12 teams I said should be in the playoff ended up being the 12 teams that are in the playoff.
I'm guessing that based on your rankings, Indiana finished number 3 because they're 11-1, because they had the third best record in the country or tied for the second best record in the country. That's why they are number 3 in your rankings.
Probably. I take the numbers from Sports Reference, and that, so I don't know exactly what the reason might be, but yeah. And then Notre Dame, after they beat Indiana, they jumped way up. I mean, so beating Indiana really pushed Notre Dame up above where they would normally be. So you can say whatever you want to about Indiana, that's fine. But you're talking about Indiana from yesteryear, I think. I think Indiana was as good a team as you could possibly play. And it also says something about,
Indiana is as good a team as you could possibly play.
yep, in my opinion.
All
Why they
right.
didn't play better, I couldn't tell you. And I had, oh yeah, that was the last thing I wanted to say. Tennessee, I had rated number 12. So
Okay.
didn't really surprise me that much that they got beat that bad. They were the 12th team in, the last team in, basically.
I'm going to give you one more shot, Chris. Again, you just stated, quote, Indiana is as good a team as you could possibly
I have them
play,
rated
end
number
quote.
6 right now. I have them rated number 6 right now. They didn't fall that much. They're number 6 right now. They're not like way off now they're number 30 or something. I have them number 6 right now.
All right. Indiana is not the 6th best team in the country.
Well, maybe not, but that's where I have them rated.
Okay.
Oh,
all right. Anything else, Chris?
Yeah, I have Ohio State rated right up there. Ohio State's probably the next best team now after beating Tennessee. I mean, they had to beat them, but I think they're
what was Ohio State ranked before the Tennessee game?
I'd have to look. I think they're number 3 right now, so they would have been behind Indiana. I don't know exactly, Mark.
They jumped up to number 3.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, they're number 3. Texas is number 4. Penn State's number 5. Indiana's number 6. Boise State's number 8. I can't remember who number 7 is.
I am not dogging your
Georgia,
rankings, Chris. I'm just basically saying I don't always understand them. I don't know how they're formulated to a certain extent.
Must be Georgia number 7. I don't know, because that makes sense to me. But yeah, Texas number 4. So
all right, Chris.
All right, thanks, Mark. Have
Appreciate
a good day.
it.
Thanks for taking
Have a
my
good
call.
night. Thank you.
Good night.
It's our buddy Chris stopping by. And again, Merry Christmas and Happy New Year to everyone here at the Voice of College Football. We appreciate you stopping by. And one thing I'm going to do here quickly before we take the next call is I'm going to start posting on the ticker below our thank you to our many members here on YouTube and on Patreon. So thank you for your support. And we are going to streamline and really review what we offer here on YouTube as a channel member, and on Patreon. We will do that at some point here soon, but we do thank you for your support. So we are listing our members down there below, and please consider becoming a member, whether that be on Patreon, and you can see the various levels, or here on YouTube. All right, next up at the Voice of College Football, we got Rob on the line. Hey, Rob.
Hey, Mark. How you doing?
Good. How you doing?
So, I just want to talk about fans in general for a second. You know, I find it funny, and I don't know how much you're probably not really watching or paying attention too much to like YouTube comments on. I mean, aside from your own videos, I'm sure you get some ridiculous ones, but I mean, there are some hilarious. Like one of the videos or one of the channels I like to watch besides yours when it comes to college football. As an Irish fan, I like to watch Locked On Irish, or just Locked On, and I've watched Locked On podcasts for other teams as well. I kind of try to get a feel for other teams and how they're viewing their programs and certain matchups, like Locked On Georgia, what they're saying about Notre Dame and this and that. And there's a young guy for that show that on Locked On Irish, and he was talking about how he's like excited about this Georgia matchup, but he's he's not like, oh, Notre Dame's going to win. He's kind of a logical fan, right? It's like, let's see how the game plays out. Let's not count our chickens before they're hatched. Yeah, you should feel good as a fan about this matchup, but that doesn't mean that, oh, yeah, Notre Dame's going to win. So there was like a 60-year-old dude, supposedly, 60, 65, something like that, in the comments, and he's like, you're just a boy. I've been around since blah, blah, blah. Notre Dame's going to blow Georgia out by 3 touchdowns. And I'm just sitting here thinking, this is the kind of fan that ruins the perception of a team, for other people. And look, every team has this, right? Every team has fans that are just ridiculous. But I don't get it. Like, how does somebody come up with this mindset, Mark?
This is what's funny. What comes to mind when you say that, Rob, is that, of course, Ohio State and Notre Dame played the last 2 regular seasons in 2022 and 23. I had, leading into those games, I had absolutely no issue with any Notre Dame fan, especially the second matchup, going into that game saying, I am fully confident Notre Dame's the better team and going to win the game. I had no issue with that comment because I thought the teams were very comparable. There could be points made on either side. The 2 statements I had an issue with was the Notre Dame fans who said that they had a better team, a better program, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, well, there's nothing that's happened in the last 30 years that has backed that up leading into this game. That doesn't mean that can't change when the teams hit the field, because they're very comparable in terms of talent, etc. So I don't have an issue with you being optimistic and hopeful and thinking your team's going to win. But don't tell me that you've had a better program over the last 25 or 30 years, because it's not debatable. That was fan number 1. Fan number 2 was the ones that guaranteed that they were going to win. And I would have said the same thing to Ohio State fans who guaranteed, and of course there were zillions of them too, guaranteed that they were going to beat Notre Dame. And many of them had these ridiculous scores, 52-10. And my response there was, no, these are very comparable teams and it should be a great game. And from what I remember, it was about as close as can be. So yeah, fans are interesting in their departure from reality. It's one thing, hey, be a fan, love your team, even admit to being biased and that you think your team's going to win every game. I want you to be that person, but either be that person and admit to being that person, or try to take a more objective look at the situation.
Yeah, I guess I'm just like old school, I don't even know if old school is the right way to put it, but I just look at it like, look, I'm a fan. I've been a Notre Dame fan my whole life. My grandpa was a huge fan. Some of my fondest memories are, sitting at his house in South Bend watching Irish games together. When I was growing up, my dad was a big fan. So I love the Irish, but I also know that they've struggled. I mean, ever since Lou Holtz left, they went into this dark time, and that's one thing I'll say to people, especially Ohio State fans. And I think a lot of them have turned around after that Tennessee win. But man, be careful what you wish for, because you get the wrong coach at a program like a blue blood, elite power program like Notre Dame was in the 90s. You get a bad coach and it can derail your entire program for, how long this has been, right? I mean, this is probably the biggest game in Notre Dame history since, the late 80s, early 90s. If they can beat Georgia, and I think they got a good shot. But if they beat Georgia, that's like, hey, okay, now that's your first legit step back to winning the title. But even then, it's not a cakewalk, right? I mean, you beat Georgia, and then you still got to face probably Ohio State. I'm assuming they're probably going to make it out of there. But, I mean, it could be Oregon. It could be Texas, although, again, I'm not huge on Texas. I know they have a great defense, but their offense just doesn't do it for me. I don't see Texas making out of a shootout with Ohio State or Oregon. But, I could be wrong. I've been wrong in the past. But yeah, I mean, I like being a fan with some logic backing up my thought process. So I'm excited for the game. Actually, that's what I was going to say too. It's really cool. There's a theater in South Bend. I'm going to go with my brother, and we're going to watch the Notre Dame game in a big screen, in the movie theater. So that's going to be pretty cool.
Oh yeah, that will be cool.
Yep. So what are your thoughts on Ohio State versus Oregon? I think it's pretty screwed up that the way that the bracket is pitting these two teams against each other so early on in the playoffs, man. Like, it's not fair to either one of them, to be honest.
No, it's not. I think if you throw the two teams from the SEC, the two teams from the Big Ten, and Notre Dame into the mix, that these are most likely. I don't think that you can rank either one of these teams objectively outside the top 5 in the country. So you've got 2 of the top 5 teams in the country, maybe the 2 best teams in the country, playing in the second round of the playoffs. It should not be this way, but this is what we have. And you have a difficult path for the number 1 seed, the only undefeated team in the country. They have this gauntlet that they've got to go through. And of course, Ohio State's is even worse since they had to play Tennessee as well. That aside, that's what the seedings are. That's what we have to deal with this year. And hopefully that will be addressed in the future. I still have to figure out how I would address it in the future. I know that there are a number of thoughts about reseeding or just seeding based on the rankings. I want to think it through a little bit more and come out with what I would do going forward, because I think too many people respond to exactly what's going on this particular year, and they don't build a system that actually is foolproof over the test of time. But regarding this matchup, I think both Ohio State fans and Oregon fans can go back to the first matchup and determine a pretty valid argument as to why their team will be even better this time around. So on the Ohio State side, obviously, whether it's 1 second more or Will Howard slides earlier or Jeremiah Smith doesn't get called for a pass interference that doesn't get called most of the time, all those things add up to Ohio State kicking a reasonable field goal to win the game on the road at Oregon. Ohio State, how many times do you have a kicker accidentally squib a kick, hit a guy on the front line of the special teams, and you get the ball, as Oregon did? That was a lucky play. It happened. Oregon, I forget who the player was in particular. I think it was the defensive tackle transfer from Michigan State, Derek Harmon, made a ridiculous play where he just took the ball out of Quinshon Judkins' hands, and that turned a possession over in Oregon's favor. How often is that going to happen? So there were a lot of things that Ohio State didn't do well. You got to think that their secondary is going to play better, you would think. So, and they played at Austin Stadium. They played in one of the most difficult environments in college football. This time it's going to be a Rose Bowl setting, neutral site. So that's the Ohio State take on why they should be better this time around. On the Oregon side, Ohio State got a bit of a gift touchdown on the first drive of the game. They had a really good drive going, but I forget exactly what the play was to the tight end where he probably fumbled. They still gave it to Ohio State, so they scored a touchdown. Outside of a long Travion Henderson run, Ohio State had difficulty running the ball. Oregon did run the ball with Jordan James on Ohio State. The Ohio State offensive line's in worse shape than it was. I think this is the biggest point and the most valid, is that Ohio State's down probably its two best offensive linemen, and Jordan Birch, one of Oregon's best middle guys, one of the best defensive tackles in the Big Ten, is back for this game, didn't play the first time. So each side has a number of items to say we're better than what we were the first time around, which of course it went down to the last play of the game. Vegas still says Ohio State's better than Oregon.
Yeah, I actually picked Ohio State in the first matchup, although I thought it was going to be pretty close. I think if they play that game in a neutral site or at Ohio State, they win that game. Personally, I mean, obviously it was a one-score game at Oregon, so I do have Ohio State winning the rematch. I just think the way they handled Tennessee, I think the Michigan loss, much in the way that Notre Dame losing to NIU kind of fired them up and got them off their laurels. I think losing to Michigan was, even though it's painful and no Ohio State fan in the world wants to hear that losing to Michigan was a good thing, I actually think that was a galvanizing loss for their team, and they came out with a huge chip on their shoulder. And unfortunately for Tennessee, they had to be the brunt. They had to bear the brunt of that frustration. So if Ryan Day can keep his guys pissed off, I think Ohio State wins that rematch. They have so many weapons, and if Chip Kelly calls a good game that utilizes them properly, they should win that game, in my opinion. Although I do think it could obviously go either way. Those are two of the top four teams without a doubt right now in the country. So very interested to see that matchup. Obviously, my Notre Dame versus Georgia matchup. Can't wait for that. Really all the games, because I want to see how Arizona State. I want to see what they can do against Texas, because to me that's kind of, if Arizona State can run the ball with Scatterboo against that Texas defense, I mean, that's what I want to see. I want to see if they can do it. And then we'll see how legit Texas really is. Not like beating Clemson to me. I mean, they were the lowest ranked team in the bracket. Arizona State, I think they're kind of a little bit of a wild card. That's what I'm curious about. I want to see how good Arizona State is. Not so much Texas. And then Penn State versus Boise. I'm just kind of expecting Penn State to roll. No offense to Boise State or their fans, but I just don't see them doing too much against Penn State. So anyways, Mark, always great talking to you. I'm going to get off. I know you probably got other people on the line. So go Bucks, go Irish, and I'll talk to you again.
Thanks for the call, Rob. Appreciate it. Have a good night.
Yeah, you too.
We always appreciate you here at the Voice of College Football. Thanks for stopping by. As you see on the ticker down below, we are saying thanks to all our members here, both on YouTube and on Patreon. And I got to tell you right now, what do you receive as a YouTube member or a Patreon member? Not a heck of a whole lot, actually, when it comes right down to it. You get my picks. That's certainly part of it. So you get my predictions on a certain tier there on Patreon. But we're revamping things, and we'll address that. But most of the response that I've ever gotten on YouTube and Patreon is, what do you want additionally? Because we do produce, I got to say, when you look at what I personally produce as a content creator here on the main channel, and keep in mind, I'm running to the Ohio State channel doing Ohio State shows, and running to the USC channel doing USC shows in the past, and used to do Michigan. I'm still doing Florida State and Notre Dame and Miami, et cetera, that we produce as much content as anybody out there. So we would like to provide more exclusive content for those folks on Patreon and YouTube, but it's got to make sense. Plus, every time I poll you guys, most of the response is just, well, Mark, you provide plenty of content now. We're just saying thank you. So I do appreciate that. All right, we got Mooley on the line. Mooley, what's going on tonight?
Hey, Mark.
Hey, how you doing?
I'm good. Pardon if I missed some stuff. I've actually been traveling, so I haven't been able to catch too much football. It's just more about the discussion. And I know this is the I know we're going today over some of the bowl games and stuff, and you probably already mentioned this, but how much seriousness are you putting into the bowl games? I'm assuming not much.
So that was one of my initial rants. So I would just advise you, not that I'm not going to answer your question, but to go back and listen to the first 10 or 15 minutes, because I went on a bit of a rant about the validity of these bowl games. And I don't know what to do with them to a certain extent, because you can't put one criteria or determination on all of them. They're not all the same. They come in different shapes and sizes. Some are more legit than others. If you're strictly looking at who showed up to play the game. Now, in terms of the win or the loss, hey, whatever team shows up represents that school, and whoever had to wear the jersey represents that school. And I don't think that there should be any tainted win or excused loss, or we should not just make them what they are, and that's an additional win or loss for each school, because that's the luck of the draw in regards to how your team came to a conclusion of who decided to leave early for the NFL draft or go into the transfer portal, or how much your team cares or doesn't care. I always thought that that was a lame excuse. But we also have to be realistic to say Oklahoma had 25 players go into the transfer portal. How legitimate? And Navy, I assume, had 0, because that's just the way things work. It's a military academy. So I don't want to take a win away from Navy. I'm not doing that, would never suggest that, or to excuse an Oklahoma loss. But there is reality to be discussed about the validity of, did the actual team show up to play this bowl game? So I hate that we live in this place where every game has to be treated differently, and we don't really have time nor the metrics to go through every game and say, well, this one's fully valid, this one's not valid at all, this one's kind of valid, this one's 80% valid. So I don't like where we've arrived in postseason play in college football.
Right, and that's really where I was gonna go, because I don't know what else to mention about these games is how much you can put in these things. Because though, at least from what I'm seeing, apparently it doesn't matter. The bowl games don't matter unless if an SEC team loses, because all I hear is, at least from my end, is that, man, how did Bama lose to this Oklahoma team and whatnot? Or, oh, Texas A&M, they lost to this. I'm seeing a lot of people doing this. Big Ten is better than SEC with all this. Well, first it started with the Tennessee loss, which was legit, which was legitimate. But now I'm just seeing all this stuff, and I'm just getting to the point where I know that there are people that troll the SEC homers, but I don't care. For everything, for every like one SEC homer thing I see 10 more. And it's not just the media. It's not that the media, the whole media as a whole, supports SEC. I'm seeing plenty of media members that are buying into the same crap. And I get it. The main ones like Kirk Herbstreit or Paul Feinbaum, like the ones with some of the most recognition, are some of these SEC homers. But that doesn't excuse. But this thing that the media has just been helping the SEC the whole time, because I've been so frustrated with the whole season about how, I don't care if you think Bama didn't deserve to be in the playoffs, but to say they didn't have an argument. And this is going to happen because we talked about the scheduling, right? If all the fans have been content with Bama being out, and I truly think it's because there's a Bama bias, there's an SEC bias, but if there's another team, like let's say next season, the ACC has a bunch of great teams, which is very plausible. And then one team loses 3, but then one team only loses 1 or 2, but the 3-loss team that played a significantly stronger strength of schedule gets left off. I feel like that's the only way we can start seeing this to happen. And this is no knock on ACC or Big 12 this year, but they kind of have been, in terms of just how like the metrics and whatnot have measured them, they don't appear to be as good as like the Big 10 and SEC. And before people come at me, I think it's very plausible for these conferences to have a good season, and they will be rewarded deservingly so. Like look at the Pac-12 in their last year. Before a couple teams like fell off, like Washington State, for example, they had some injury issues. They had like halfway through the season last year, they had like 8 teams or 7 teams ranked. So I think it's very possible. It's just, I don't mean to go on this rant, but I'm just saying like the fact that a lot of these fans are content with, oh, well, it's fine because they got the teams in. Well, I do think something has to be said about only losing by 3 points in the regular season. I think that's very impressive in itself. But when you play a 75th strength of schedule going into your championship game, that should also be taken into account as well, to where something needs to be done to where there's not so much discrepancy in these schedules. And I don't know how I got back onto this topic, but sorry, I just got it. I just wanted to get that off my chest.
Well, I will say, Mooley, that I don't know exactly which direction to take our conversation past that. I could go in a million directions. I made a statement off the top as I was going after Indiana a bit, and this was only in light of USC winning against Texas A&M last night. That
I'm sorry, Mark. I
Sure.
actually have to go.
All right, sir.
Hope you have a great time.
Have a good night. All right. So there's the book, Disputed National Champions. Please check it out. The link is in the description section. What this is not a history book. This is a look through the 1990s, which I consider to be the most formative decade in the history of college football in determining a national champion, because we had the poll era start the decade. Then we had the Bowl Coalition introduced. And then, of course, the BCS, which led to the 14 playoff, the 12-team playoff, and we may see soon a 14 or a 16-team playoff. So we look at each season and we break it down top to bottom in regards to the preseason hype, the preseason rankings, how the season played out, the postseason, the bowl matchups, how those were determined, if they were correct, who got screwed, who got left out, how legitimate was the championship, and then the aftermath of that particular season and what it meant to the history of college football, who emerged, who was in decline, who gave birth to a dynasty. All of those things are examined each particular year, 1990 through 1999. And then beyond that I think is the most fun portion of this book, is to place each and every season into the future formations of playoff systems. So we took each season and placed it into the BCS era and what would have happened in regards to rankings and who would have been playing in the BCS championship game, who would have played in a 4-team playoff, a 12-team playoff, and the proposed 14-team playoff. 1991. Of course, that was the year that Washington and Miami shared the national championship. Your 12-team playoff in 1991 would have been, listen to this, your 12 seed, East Carolina, who was actually the 12th ranked team in the country. This was not East Carolina coming from like number 24 as the best group of 5. They were actually East Carolina in 1991, number 12 in the country at 10-1, and the highest ranked group of 5. Then you had Bama at 11, 10-1, Iowa at number 10, 10-1, Penn State number 9, 10-2, Florida State number 8, 10-2, Miami number 7 in the country at 11-0. They would have been the 7th seed. Why? Because they did not play in a conference. Therefore, your first 6 spots were reserved for conference champions. Washington, number 1, Pac-10 champion, 11-0. Number 2, Florida, SEC champion, 10-1. Michigan, number 3, Big Ten champion, 10-1. Nebraska, number 4, Big 8 champion, 9-1-1. Texas A&M out of the Southwest Conference, 10-1. And number 6, Clemson, the ACC champion, 9-1-1. That was your 12-team playoff in 1991. Washington 1, Florida 2, Michigan 3, Nebraska 4, Texas A&M 5, Clemson 6, Miami 7, Florida State 8, Penn State 9, Iowa, Alabama, and East Carolina. So anyway, $9.99. You've rarely spent $10 so wisely. $9.99 for your national champions, disputed national champions book. The link is in the description section. All right. It appears as though we've done just about as much damage as we can do. We've taken all the calls. We have no more comments or questions to me here in the chat. So we appreciate you being here at the Voice of College Football. And I have much to work on. We will have Notre Dame, Georgia preview videos coming out. Ohio State and Oregon and all the matchup. Boise State, Penn State, and of course the other game, Texas and Arizona State. We've got Spencer McLaughlin showing up here in the next couple of days from Locked On Ducks. And we've got, let's see, Chris Drew from the Menace to Sports show. We're going to get together. So some of these are going to be recorded videos. I'm going to cut loose with a live stream. I had attempted to put together like a massive Notre Dame, Georgia live stream and to put together a massive Oregon, Ohio State live stream. Sorry, Penn State, Boise State, Arizona State, and Texas. Didn't think that you quite deserved that type of attention. But it was difficult to put people's schedules together. So, again, we will have all sorts of analysis. And as it was pointed out to me the other day, and this is proven to be pretty obvious, and I'm not on some type of ego trip saying this, but it just, it's obvious from the response to these videos. For some reason, you people watch videos with just me on this channel. So when I have a guest, you people don't watch the videos. So those videos will most of the time put on those team channels. This is very apparent. So I will do my analysis on these games, and we will have these conversations elsewhere. And also keep in mind, we did the Ohio State show today with Ryan Winter from Sports Chat 503 showing up. That is a tremendous conversation and preview of Ohio State and Oregon. Check it out. Check it out on the Ohio State channel. Excellent 1-hour conversation and preview of the Rose Bowl. All right, folks, appreciate you being here at the Voice of College Football. And I'm going to go watch some bowl games, and we will see you soon. Keep it locked in here. Notifications, turn them on to know when we go live. Please subscribe on your way out. Please like the video. It helps promote the channel through YouTube. Appreciate you being here. And I will see you, if not sooner, Monday night for the Big Ten Live Show.